And a lot of the way that that can be used now is we have 90 million small businesses that use our tools. And now, because of this access to technology, they have access to the same tools to do advertising and marketing and reach new customers and grow jobs that previously only the big companies would have had. And that's a big advance, and that's a massive decentralization. When people talk about our company and the internet platforms overall, they talk about how there's a small number of companies that are big, and that's true. But the flip side of it is that now there are billions of people around the world who have a voice, that they can share information more broadly, and that's actually a massive decentralization in power, and kind of returning power to people. Similarly, people have access to more information, have access to more commerce. That's all positive. So I don't know. I'm an optimist on this. I think we have real work cut out for us, and I think that the challenges that you raise are the right ones to be thinking about, because if we get it wrong, that's the way in which I think it will go wrong. But I don't know. I think that the historical precedent would say that at all points, where there was the competition between the U.S. and Japan in the 80s and the 70s, or the Cold War before that, or different other times, people always thought that the democratic model, which is slow to mobilize, but very strong once it does, and once people get bought into a direction and understand the issue, I do think that will continue to be the best way to spread prosperity around the world and make progress in a way that meets people's needs. And that's why, when we're talking about internet policy, when you're talking about economic policy, I think spreading regulatory frameworks that encode those values, I think is one of the most important things that we can do. But it starts with raising the issues that you are and having people be aware of the potential problems.
Yeah, I agree that in the last few decades, it was the case that open democratic systems were better and more efficient. And this, again, one of my fears is that it might have made us a bit complacent, because we assume that this is kind of a law of nature, that distributed systems are always better and more efficient than centralized systems. And we grew up in a world in which there was kind of this, to do the good thing morally was also to do the efficient thing economically and politically. And a lot of countries liberalized their economy, their society, their politics over the last 50 years, more because they were convinced of the efficiency argument than of the deep moral argument. And what happens if efficiency and morality suddenly split? Which have happened before in history. I mean, the last 50 years are not representative of the whole of history. We had many cases before in human history in which repressive, centralized systems were more efficient, and therefore you got these repressive empires. And there is no law of nature which says that this cannot happen again. And again, my fear is that the new technology might tilt that balance. And just by making central data processing far more efficient, it could give a boost to totalitarian regimes. Also, in the balance of power between, say, again, the center and the individual, that for most of history, the central authority could not really know you personally, simply because of the inability to gather and process the information. So there were some people who knew you very well, but usually their interests were aligned with yours. Like my mother knows me very well, but most of the time I can trust my mother. But now we are reaching a point when some system far away can know me better than my mother, and the interests are not necessarily aligned. Now, yes, we can use that also for good, but what I'm pointing out, that this is a kind of power that never existed before, and it could empower totalitarian and authoritarian regimes to do things that was simply technically impossible until today.
Yeah.
And if you live in an open democracy, so okay, you can rely on all kinds of mechanisms to protect yourself. But thinking more globally about this issue, I think a key question is, how do you protect human attention from being hijacked by malevolent players who know you better than you know yourself, who know you better than your mother knows you. And this is a question that we never had to face before, because we never had, usually the malevolent players just didn't know me very well.